You are listening to one of Chi Alpha Christian Fellowship's audio messages. If you are interested in learning more about Chi Alpha, please see our website at www.auburn.edu/xa.
Hey, last time we talked a little bit about transition, and today I want to talk a little more about transition, but particularly having courage in transition. Let's read the Bible. This is Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. This is what God told Joshua in the midst of a transition that he was in, and this is what God said. Josh, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So God tells Joshua, I don't want you to be afraid. In fact, I want you to put on courage because I'm with you. Here's the context. As Joshua was in a transition, the children of Israel had been in the desert for about 40 years, and they had learned a whole system, a whole way of life. They learned how to be desert people. They gathered manna in the morning. That was life for them. But God promised them an inheritance in the promised land. So you know what would have to happen between point A, the desert, and point B, the promised land, was the transition in between the two of those. And so God tells Joshua, I want you to be courageous in this transition. Now Joshua had sent scouts into the land beforehand, and they found out that the promised land was all that God said it would be. It was a land flowing with milk and honey. It had big fruit, but it also had giants in it. And there were people, and the people, some of the scouts that went said, these giants are huge, and we are like grasshoppers in our own eyes. But a couple of the guys said, no, we can totally take the land. And so now it's like game time, and they're really going into the land. Now, this is the first thing he says, is have I not commanded you? So, just point blank, God is saying here, I expect you to do this. This is not like a suggestion or a thought, but this is something that's in my category of expectations for you, Joshua, is that in your transitional time, that you be strong and courageous. Now, he's basically saying, put on strength. Now, I don't know what transition you're in right now. You may be in the beginning of a new job, or maybe you're a few weeks into it at this point. You may be into the semester. You might be trying to adapt now to life in a new set of circumstances. And the fact is that we are all in transition throughout our lives, and we're continually having to make adjustments and change. So God tells Joshua, put on strength, like put on, be strong, like strap up the proverbial bootstraps. And then he says, be courageous. Now, courage is required where courage is needed. And so when you are in transition, there's good things that God has promised for you in every transition that he calls you to. But don't be surprised if in the land of promise that God has for you, there is also a giant or giants that have to be conquered, that have to be pushed away, that have to be dealt with. The giant for you, it may be fear. The giant for you might be an intimidating teacher. It might be a boss who seems like that they can't be pleased, or a boss that seems like you don't know if you're doing a good job or not. You're not sure. God says, hey, I want you to, first of all, I want you to get in this frame of mind, is to be strong, be courageous. Now, in transition or in any forward movement, if we're thinking of moving from point A to point B, courage and strength are forward momentum givers. And so then God tells Joshua after that, he says, do not be terrified or discouraged. Now I think that he said these two things because probably the root cause of discouragement is actually fear or terror. And you would know this from terrorist attacks. They're meant to freeze us in fear. to stop our life as it is supposed to be. And that's what fear does in general. Fear will stymie us in moving forward into our destiny. Now, why could God say this? And why could God command Joshua, be strong, don't be afraid? The way that God could do that is very simple. It's because He is with you. See, this is the coolest thing about asking God to come into your life, asking Jesus into your heart, is that He comes. He does. I remember when I asked the Lord into my heart when I was 16 years old. It's like He thought I was serious. He came. There was a transformation on the inside of me, and God came to hang out with me. I was like, oh my goodness, He's really with me. And I think sometimes as we travel on in life, we forget. No, God is not just with you on Sunday or when you're worshiping or when you're having your quiet time, but He's with you in the middle of your job. He is sitting there with you when you're in class, in a torturous class. God is right there with you. Or what about a mundane, boring class? So be strong, be courageous, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged, because I'm with you. God is the great equalizer. I had a dream the other night, and it was interesting. The dream was that I was in this huge valley, beautiful, very nice. I was sitting under a tree with my dad, and I was deer hunting, which is sort of like my promised land, I guess. It was something that I enjoyed doing. So I was deer hunting this huge valley. I was just noticing how beautiful it was. And I also noticed some other people were in the valley. It was big enough for all of us. They were in tents. And all of a sudden, my dad and I looked to the side. There's this green futuristic tank, like a war machine. I mean, this thing looked like it was from Future Weapons. If you've ever seen that video, this green tank, and this green tank had these guns on it that were futuristic, and we were just kind of in awe. It was like it was real. We were in awe. We were watching the tank. And then the tank rolls over, it stops, and it moves around to where one of those tents were. And all of a sudden, it blasts the tent. And we were blown away because I knew I'd seen people in that tent. So we were blown away. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so you might can guess, I was scared spitless. And so all of a sudden, I was like, oh no. I was trying to keep this big rock in between me and the tank so that the tank couldn't see me. Now, it's no surprise, after I started processing this dream and thinking about what I'm talking with you about today. In transition, there are things that are bigger than us. Like a futuristic weapon like that, I felt really powerless. Even though I had a gun, I felt very outmanned and outmatched. And I don't know if you feel outmanned or outmatched in circumstances that you're in right now, but can I just say this? You are. The things, the problems or whatever of this world, they're greater than what we can handle on our own. But God is the great equalizer. See, when God told Gideon, hey, you mighty man of valor, Gideon felt very small. But God told him, that He was going to use him. And he had a bunch of guys. And so the odds were pretty even. And so God didn't even want to keep it like that. But He told Gideon, hey, we need to remove some of these soldiers. And there was thousands versus thousands. But then Gideon's army, God narrowed it down to 300 people so that it would be 300 against thousands. And I just think it's almost comical. I'm sure it wasn't comical if you were Gideon, but it's amazing to me how the destiny that God calls us to is often so much bigger than we are. And the things in our life that we need to process, even the little things, seem overwhelming to us at times. But God loves uneven odds because it shows how powerful and how strong He is. And so, also, there's no surprise that in the land that has good deer hunting, there are also green tanks. And I'm no match for green tanks, but God is. And I think that's the lesson of the dream. So anyway, I just want you guys to know today, if there's an encouragement that I can give you, it's that God is with you, the God that created the heavens and the universe.